Many people assume that Buddhism presents a bleak and pessimistic outlook on life, defining existence solely through suffering. This misunderstanding often stems from a superficial reading of the First Noble Truth. However, to view Buddhism in such a narrow light is to miss the depth and transformative power of its teachings. Buddhism does not deny suffering, but neither does it wallow in it. Instead, it acknowledges suffering as an undeniable part of human experience and then provides a profound yet practical framework to transcend it. The Buddha's teachings are rooted in wisdom and compassion, designed to help individuals break free from the endless cycle of dissatisfaction and discover an enduring state of peace. To understand why this misconception persists, we must consider the cultural and historical contexts in which Buddhism has been introduced to the Western world. Many early scholars, influenced by Judeo-Christian frameworks, misinterpreted Buddhist doctrines by contrasting them with their own religious narratives. In Christianity, suffering is often seen as a consequence of sin or a test of faith, whereas Buddhism approaches suffering as a phenomenon that can be understood, addressed, and ultimately eliminated through right understanding and practice. Moreover, the tendency to summarize Buddhism's First Noble Truth as life is suffering oversimplifies its meaning. The Buddha did not teach that life itself is suffering. Rather, he taught that suffering arises due to attachment, craving, and ignorance. This distinction is crucial because it shifts the focus from passive resignation to an active pursuit of liberation. A more accurate interpretation of the First Noble Truth is that suffering exists as a condition of unenlightened existence, but it is neither absolute nor insurmountable. This perspective offers hope rather than despair, as it points to a solution: the cessation of suffering through wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. The essence of Buddhism, then, is not in proclaiming suffering as life's defining feature, but in guiding individuals toward a path of understanding, balance, and inner peace. It encourages self-reflection and personal growth, leading to a life that is not just free from suffering but filled with meaning and joy. This essay will explore the core teachings of Buddhism, dispelling common myths while illustrating how these ancient principles remain relevant in today's world. Through real-life stories and practical applications, we will see how Buddhism offers not only insight into suffering but also a profound vision of happiness and liberation. The true meaning of the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths form the foundation of Buddhist thought and practice, providing a clear and structured approach to understanding suffering and how to transcend it. Unlike dogmatic assertions or philosophical speculations, these truths are meant to be explored and realized through personal experience. Let's delve deeper into each of them. The First Noble Truth: suffering exists, dukkha. The Buddha identified suffering as an unavoidable part of life, but not as an all-encompassing condemnation of existence. Instead, he highlighted the various forms suffering takes, including physical pain, emotional distress, aging, sickness, and the inevitable separation from loved ones. However, this truth does not imply that life is devoid of joy or meaning. It simply acknowledges that suffering is a shared human experience and invites us to investigate its nature rather than run from it. The key takeaway is not despair, but awareness, recognizing suffering so that we can ultimately rise above it. The Second Noble Truth: the cause of suffering, samadaya. The root of suffering lies in craving, tanha, and attachment, upadana, our constant desire for pleasure, permanence, and control. We suffer because we expect things to remain unchanged, yet the nature of life is impermanence. Relationships evolve, material wealth fluctuates, and even our own bodies are in a state of constant change. The mind's tendency to grasp onto things, whether it be relationships, achievements, or even self-identity, creates a cycle of dissatisfaction. By understanding that craving is the cause of suffering, we can begin to loosen our grip and find a more balanced way of experiencing life. The third noble truth, the end of suffering, Nirodha. The good news is that suffering can end. The Buddha taught that by letting go of attachment and craving, we free ourselves from suffering. This does not mean we must abandon everything or live in isolation. Rather, it means developing a deep awareness of our attachments and learning to interact with life without clinging. The state of nirvana, often misunderstood as a mystical void, is actually a state of profound peace, clarity, and liberation from suffering. It is not something reserved for monks or ascetics but is attainable by anyone who earnestly follows the path. The fourth noble truth, the path to liberation, Magga. The Buddha did not merely diagnose the problem of suffering, he provided a solution, the Eightfold Path. This path serves as a guide for ethical living, mental development, and wisdom. It consists of right view, understanding the nature of reality and the Four Noble Truths. Right intention, cultivating thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. Right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and without harm. Right action, conducting oneself ethically through non-harmful actions. Right livelihood, earning a living in a way that does not cause suffering to others. Right effort, making a conscious effort to develop positive mental states. Right mindfulness, maintaining awareness of thoughts, feelings, and actions. Right concentration, developing deep mental focus through meditation. By following the Eightfold Path, individuals can progressively reduce suffering and cultivate a mind free from greed, hatred, and delusion. The Four Noble Truths are not abstract theories, nor are they meant to be believed blindly. They are an invitation to examine our own lives, to see where suffering arises, and to take active steps toward transformation. Understanding these truths allows us to move beyond a passive acceptance of suffering and instead engage with life in a way that is both profound and liberating. Misconceptions about Buddhism in the West. One of the greatest misunderstandings about Buddhism in the West is the assumption that it promotes passivity, nihilism, or detachment from the world in a negative sense. This could not be further from the truth. Buddhism is not pessimistic. While it acknowledges suffering, it offers a practical solution to overcome it. Buddhism does not advocate for nihilism. Instead, it teaches the middle way, encouraging engagement with life through wisdom and compassion. Buddhism is not about blind faith. It is a practical and experiential philosophy that invites inquiry and self-exploration. Buddhism is not solely about meditation. While meditation is a key practice, ethical living and mindfulness in everyday life are equally emphasized. Buddhism does not reject happiness. True happiness, according to Buddhist teachings, arises from wisdom, inner peace, and freedom from craving rather than external circumstances. Understanding these nuances allows for a richer, more accurate engagement with Buddhist philosophy and its profound insights into human existence. Buddhism is not just a philosophy of abstract principles, it is deeply rooted in lived experience. The teachings of the Buddha are often best understood through stories that illustrate key aspects of wisdom, compassion, and the impermanence of life. Here are some powerful narratives that bring Buddhist philosophy to life. The wealthy merchant and his search for happiness. A wealthy merchant named Devdatta had everything money could buy: luxury, status, and power, but still felt a deep void. He sought out the Buddha and asked why he was unhappy despite possessing everything. The Buddha replied, "You suffer not because you lack something, but because you are afraid of losing what you have. The more you cling, the more you suffer." Realizing this truth, Devdatta slowly learned to detach himself from his possessions and find joy in the present moment. Eventually, he discovered a peace that no amount of wealth could bring. The farmer and the stolen cows. One day, a farmer ran to the Buddha in distress, crying that all his cows had been stolen. The Buddha looked at his disciples and said, "Aren't we lucky? We don't have any cows to lose." The moral of the story is that suffering often comes from attachment. The more we attach ourselves to things, the more vulnerable we are to suffering. The man who carried his past. A monk was traveling with his apprentice. Along the way, they encountered a river where a woman struggled to cross. The elder monk carried her across and set her down on the other side. Hours later, the apprentice asked, "Why did you carry that woman? We are not supposed to touch women." The elder monk replied, "I put her down at the riverbank. Why are you still carrying her?" This story teaches that we often hold on to unnecessary burdens, resentments, guilt, or past mistakes. By letting go, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. The broken teacup. A Zen master would always say, "This teacup is already broken." One day, his disciple asked, "Master, what do you mean?" "The cup is still intact." The master replied, "To truly appreciate something, you must understand that it will not last forever. The cup is already broken in my mind, so when it eventually shatters, I will not suffer. Instead, I enjoy it while it lasts." This illustrates the Buddhist understanding of impermanence. Everything changes, and nothing lasts forever. By accepting this reality, we can live more peacefully. The two arrows of pain. The Buddha once asked his disciples, "If a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful?" "Yes, Master," they replied. "Now, if a second arrow strikes the same spot, is it even more painful?" "Yes, Master," they agreed. In life, suffering is like the first arrow, it is unavoidable. But the second arrow is the suffering we create in our minds, through regret, worry, and attachment. We cannot avoid the first arrow, but we can avoid the second. This story highlights how much of our suffering is self-inflicted through mental resistance rather than external circumstances. 6. The empty boat. A man was rowing his boat across a river when he saw another boat coming toward him. He yelled, "Move out of the way!" But the boat kept coming. He shouted again in anger. As it got closer, he realized the boat was empty, there was no one to blame. The lesson: often, we react with anger, assuming someone is at fault. But much of what happens in life is like the empty boat. There is no one to blame, just circumstances unfolding. Understanding this reduces unnecessary anger and frustration. How to apply Buddhist teachings in daily life. Practice mindfulness. Being fully present in the moment helps reduce unnecessary anxieties and regrets. Simple practices like mindful breathing, eating, and walking enhance awareness and tranquility. Detach from impermanence. Accepting change as a fundamental part of life helps lessen suffering. Instead of resisting the natural flow of life, learn to embrace transitions with grace and wisdom. Follow the middle path. Avoid extreme indulgence or severe self-denial. Balance is key. Make conscious choices that promote long-term well-being rather than temporary pleasure. Cultivate compassion and loving kindness. By understanding that all beings experience suffering, we develop empathy and reduce anger. Acts of kindness, both big and small, contribute to inner peace and social harmony. Engage in right speech and right action. Speaking truthfully and kindly fosters better relationships. Ethical conduct, including honesty and non-harm, leads to a more fulfilling life. Let go of attachments and expectations. Holding on to rigid expectations often leads to disappointment. Learn to approach life with openness, allowing experiences to unfold naturally. regular meditation and self-reflection. Daily meditation cultivates mental clarity and emotional resilience. Taking time for introspection helps recognize and transform unwholesome habits. Applying these principles in everyday life does not require becoming a monk or withdrawing from the world. Instead, Buddhism encourages integrating its wisdom into daily interactions, work, and personal growth. With continuous effort, one can develop a more peaceful and fulfilling existence, free from unnecessary suffering. Buddhism is not about resigning to suffering but about transforming our perception of it. It teaches that suffering arises from attachment, but by understanding its roots, we can break free from it. True happiness comes not from avoiding pain but from cultivating inner wisdom and resilience. By practicing the Eightfold Path, embracing impermanence, and fostering a compassionate heart, anyone can transcend suffering. The Buddha's teachings are not abstract ideals but practical tools that can be applied in everyday life. Ultimately, Buddhism does not teach that life is suffering, it teaches that suffering is a construct of the mind. Once we relinquish attachment and see the world as it truly is, we uncover a profound, enduring peace. Through wisdom and self-awareness, we move beyond suffering into a life of true fulfillment and freedom.